Good evening, class. We're going to start videos now for Chapter 2. And so tonight's video is going to be on 2.1. It's going to be on the properties of numbers. Now some of these should seem kind of familiar. We talked about them in Course 1 if you were here in 6th grade. And they're properties that you've seen before. Very quickly, let's go ahead. And the properties that we're talking about, these are properties that work for any kind of real number. We're talking about the commutative property, the associative property, and the identity property. Okay, and we're going to talk about these three properties for both addition and for multiplication. Oops. There we go, for multiplication. All right. Now, I want you to look at the root of the words, okay? Commute. There's no N in it, first of all, so pay attention to how to spell it. It's got two M's, and it ends with UT, and then it ends with ATIVE. And you notice that actually both commutative and associative end with IVE. So I want you to look at just the root part, commute. Now, think about sorry, I just had a little interruption. Anyway, so when you go back and forth from home to school, and then again from school to home, or your parents drive maybe from home to their place of work and then back home. If you drive on the exact same streets on the way to school as you do from school back to home, you're going to travel the same distance. Well, that's your daily commute, okay? Your commute from home to school, and then your commute back from school back to home. So that's how you want to remember the commutative property, commute. And so in addition, basically the commutative property says that if you reverse the order, 3 plus 7 is exactly the same thing as if you had 7 plus 3. Okay? So again, it doesn't matter whether you're driving from home to school or school to home. The order doesn't matter. The end result will be the same. Now it also works on multiplication, and you learned this back when you were learning your times tables. Once you knew that 3 times 7 was 21, you also knew that 7 times 3 was 21. Okay, so that's the commutative property of either addition or of multiplication, and we do add the of addition or of multiplication afterwards. Okay, let's skip down now and let's talk about the associative property. Okay, think about the root this time, associate. Okay, you associate with people that you choose to make your friends, acquaintances. Okay, associative, when we're talking about numbers, is also going to involve a matter of grouping, and we're going to group with parentheses. Okay, so in this case, let's look at something like 3 plus 4 in parentheses, and then let's add 5. Well, what the associative property says that if we leave the 3 out and instead we group the 4 and the 5 inside parentheses, it doesn't matter how we change the grouping. It's the same three numbers added up eventually, and so we're going to get the same sum. Okay, so now order of operations, this does not contradict order of operations. So in the first one, we are doing the 3 plus 4 initially because of the parentheses, and then we're adding in 5. What the associative property says is it doesn't matter what order we go in. In the second half, we're actually adding the 4 plus 5 together and getting 9, then adding the 3 in. Either way, the sum comes out to be 12. Okay, now the same thing is true in multiplication. So if I take something like 3 times xy in parentheses, that means 3 times x times y, but the x times y would actually get done first because of the parentheses. If I change the parentheses and instead put the 3 and the x in parentheses, and then put the y afterwards, I'm going to get the same product. Okay, and that's the associative property. So again, think about the root word, associate, okay, and that'll help you remember that what we're doing is we're regrouping. Okay, we're just regrouping which numbers are associating with each other. But the ultimate sum, when we're dealing with addition, or the ultimate product will be the same. Okay, so again, remember the root words, commute, back and forth, either direction doesn't matter. Associative, it doesn't matter what numbers are grouped together and are associated together. you'll still get the same sum. Now the identity property is a little different from addition and multiplication. Okay, but the idea is the same. The identity property means what number can you use to not change things. So in addition, what number can I add to any number and have it come out exactly the same? All right, if you think about that quick, the only number you can add without changing the sum is 0. Okay, the identity property of multiplication says the same thing. What number can I multiply any number by and not have it change? And if you think about that, the only number you can multiply by that won't change the product, is 1. Okay, so the identity property of addition says that 0 is the additive identity. If you add it to stuff, it doesn't change. The multiplicative identity property, or the identity property of multiplication, says that 1 is the multiplicative identity. All right, now these may seem like really obvious properties. Like, why do we need to bother learning the name for these? Well, first of all, these are things that we take for granted in the real numbers, but when we study other types of numbers later on in high school math, like things like matrices, these things that we take for granted aren't always going to hold. In addition, we can use these properties to kind of help us simplify some problems. So if we know, for instance, the commutative and the associative property, we can reorder a whole bunch of additions or a whole bunch of multiplications to make the work easier, especially if we're going to be doing it mentally. Okay, but before we can use the properties, we've got to recognize the properties. So let's go ahead and let me give you several examples, and I'm just going to write a bunch of these down the left-hand side, and we're going to go through them one by one, and I'd like you to identify what property you think each of these are. Okay, so the first one, we've changed the order. It's an addition, so that would be the commutative. And again, pay attention to how you spell it. It's commute, A-T-I-V-E, and then we'll say prop of, and we do at least need to indicate that it's addition, not multiplication, and oh my goodness, that didn't come out very good, so let me try that again. Let's make a little plus sign here. Okay, there we go. The commutative property of addition. That's good enough. Okay. Now I want you to look through these next 5. Go ahead and pause the video and just jot down on a piece of paper or in your notes, or possibly over to the right of your daily quiz log that you're going to be filling in class tomorrow. Go ahead and just sketch in the answers for these. What property is being shown? You don't have to evaluate any of them. Just write out the name of the property. And you can abbreviate. Do be a little careful abbreviating associative. Usually if we're going to abbreviate these, we use about 5 letters. So you could write commute, prop of addition. Okay. Okay, so go ahead and pause me now. Jot down your best answer for these 5, and then resume the recording, and we'll see if we agree. Okay. You should have answered these, so hopefully you wrote down for the next one. Let's see. That would be the identity property of, and I'm going to use MULT to abbreviate multiplication. Identity property of multiplication. Okay. The next one, take a close look at it. It's all multiplication, but I've regrouped with parentheses from the left to the right, and so we've changed the association. So we'll call that the associative property, and again, it's of multiplication, so we'll say of multiplication. The next one is we reverse the order. That's the back and forth to school one. That's called the commutative property. You can abbreviate that one COMM property, and again, it's of multiplication. Okay. Now I want you to look really closely at the next one. The next one is a lot sneakier than you might think. Okay, probably if you look at it quick, you notice that there were parentheses. But inside the parentheses, both parentheses have the exact same thing, 2 plus x. I did not change the association. Furthermore, I have addition inside the parentheses, and outside the parentheses, and I didn't put a dot there, but outside the parentheses, there's multiplication. Now if you look at the multiplication, what's actually changed is the parentheses and the y are on opposite sides. In the first one, you start with the parentheses and multiply by y. In the second one, you start with y and end with the parentheses. So what you've actually done here is you've changed the order of the multiplication. So just like the one above, this is actually the commutative property of multiplication once again. Okay? And then the final one, we're adding 0 to something, so that's the identity property, not of multiplication this time because we're adding, so we'll say of addition. And again, we'll put a period there. Okay? So there's just a quick example of the properties. Now, I mentioned a second ago that you can use these properties to simplify some problems. So using these properties, let's take a look at a couple examples quickly. Suppose I give you 118 plus 97.6 plus 2, and we'll ignore that bottom one for a second, okay? If I were to use the commutative property of addition and reverse the order of these two numbers, I want you to look at what would happen. You get 118 plus 2 plus 97.6. All right, now, if I put parentheses around the first two, then technically you could just use order of operations and go from left to right, but I want you to look at how much easier the problem is. 118 plus 2 is easy. We can do that in our head. It's 200. And then if we add 200, that's a very easy number, plus anything, 97.6, we get 297.6. No calculator, no lining things up, no having to worry about the decimal points, and we're able to very quickly get an answer. Okay. Now, if I look at the bottom one, same thing. This time I've got to first use the associative property and drop the parentheses. Okay, so I get 4.55 plus 27 plus 5.45, and I use the associative property to do that. One of the things the associative property says, it says you can move the parentheses from the first two numbers to the second and third number, or you can take them off completely. Now, once again, let's use the commutative property, and let's reverse the order of these two. So I get 4.55 plus 5.45 plus 27. And again, if I now either regroup or at least just look at these two numbers, they fit together really nicely. That's going to simplify to just 10.0. And 10.0 plus 27 is just 37. So again, I'm able to do the math mentally by using the properties to reorganize some of the numbers. That's it. Okay? So again, they may seem a little obvious, but it is important to memorize and really remember these properties, and you might want to review them very quickly for your daily quiz tomorrow. Okay, that's all I have for you tonight. Take care, and remember that you will be with Miss Lounsbury in her room for class tomorrow while Mr. Hurst and I are gone to Green River Preserve. Okay, so be ready for a regular daily quiz and for some classwork. All right? We'll see you when we get back, and there'll be another video for tomorrow night. Bye now.